rehearsal. So, hi everyone. Thank you to Healthy and Free, Anthony, everyone who's here. Also, Jennifer, who is working on my campaign, and now you know why. Candace, who's running around as well. She's also our campaign manager. And just thank you for being here because everyone's busy. We all got things to do, and who wants to come to talk to a possible politician? But I'm here to actually let you know that I'm actually not a politician, and that's exactly why I'm running. So there's three things I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a little brief history of who I am as a human being, so you have a better understanding of who I am. I'm going to give you a brief history of the community work I've done, and I'm going to give you a brief history of what we want to do for California. Okay? So I was born in San Francisco. I was raised in a little place called Nevada County in Nevada City, which is up in Northern California. It is northwest of Sacramento. And I was raised there my whole entire life by my hardworking registered nurse mother, my Teamster truck driver father. So my history basically, and this is really important to understand because it really has had an influence on my style of leadership. I was adopted when I was 2 months old, and I actually started looking for my birth parents when I was 11 years old, actively writing letters. Finally, by the time I was 19, my adopted mother died, still couldn't find my family, and then I'm now 24 and I'm looking for my family and I couldn't find them. And I thought I was never gonna find my mother. So I decided, if you're not gonna find your family, like where are you on this map? Where'd you come from? Where are you going? Then go out there, push the limit and see what you're made of. By that time, I'd already traveled almost 60 countries and I was a mountain climber, I'd done different things. And so I thought, well, if I'm gonna go do something to see what I'm made of, I'm gonna go cross Alaska by myself in the dead of winter. Very logical. And so in order to do this, I decided I'd commercial fish first up in the Alaskan Gulf, and I got on a boat called the Big Valley that I would see actually sink about 12 years later on a show called The Deadliest Catch. And my captain and actually 5 other crew members went down. And so I did that for 6 months and I survived. And I thought, okay, if I can survive commercial fishing, I can survive crossing Alaska. Now, why is this important to my leadership? Well, I'll share some stories with you. So I started this trip on February 14th, and it was 45 below, and I was filming with National Geographic. And I want to make this very clear. If somebody had said to me, hey, Reinette, in order for you to cross the state, you're going to have to do this, and that, I would have said, I can't do that. That's impossible feats. I wouldn't even know how to start to do that. But when the challenge would come along, I'd always meet the challenge and excel. So in a nutshell, what I did is I skied 600 miles down the frozen Yukon River, pulling my own 160-pound sled. I got a dog along the way to help me pull my sled. And this real defining moment happened on this trip. And it's really important because it's exactly where we are right now. The only road I knew was the frozen Yukon River. I was skiing down that river to get to the other side. And all of a sudden, ahead of schedule, the ice began to melt. And the only road I knew was melting below my feet. And I realized I have two options, like we do right now. I give up, or I find a different way to continue. So I stayed in an Athabascan native village called Stevens Village, and while I was there, I was thinking to myself, well, I'll figure out what to do. Do I give up? Do I come back and continue next year? Do I find a different way to go? And what's so amazing and beautiful about life is I couldn't see the door, right? I couldn't see a pathway forward, another room to go into and continue. It wasn't available. And as I'm asking this question, going in and out of my little cabin that was lent to me, this little snowbank is melting next to my front door, and I see this little green thing protruding as the snow melts. And I'm like, what is that? And I dug it out, and I pulled out the last canoe built in this Yukon village 20 years before. And then I said to myself, that's it. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna build myself a canoe. So I went to all the elders and I said, I'm gonna build a canoe. And I kept going, I'm gonna build a canoe. Hey, I'm building a canoe. And then a day later, word got back to me that women don't build canoes in their culture. So I had to go back to them and say, no, you don't understand. Where I come from in California, that's what women do. We're canoe builders. Well, they couldn't Google that back then. They didn't know that not all California women were canoe builders. And so this was the best opportunity of my life, and I got to see this beautiful glimpse into our humanity. So what happened was a big-bellied Athabascan named Herb was a good friend, came to have a fatherly talk with me, because he's like, you're not doing this. And we sat down the 3 trees I'd already cut down because they lent me tools. And he says to me, we call you Wonder Woman because of all the miles you can ski in a day. But you built this canoe, and we're gonna call you Fruitcake. So I start hand planing 5 days a week, 5 hours a day, and I do these beautiful strips of 18-foot long wood, and I submerge them in the local muskrat pond, and then after 2.5 weeks, I take them, put them at my feet, and this whole entire time that I was hand planing, they're passing by going, fruitcake, fruitcake, and the kids were emulating that, right? They're like, fruitcake, and they're saying this over and over again. And then this beautiful thing happened. I saw a transformation. I saw a glimpse into our humanity. I took all those planks of wood, I laid them at my feet, and I began to assemble. And all of a sudden, they stopped coming by saying fruitcake, and instead they came by saying, I got some C-clamps if you need some C-clamps for that. I got some galvanized screws if you need some. And someone else came by saying, I got some oil-based marine paint. Do you like blue and red? And that's when I saw how we work as a human species. And that experience has completely influenced my style of leadership. I believe in the collective genius, and that is what I am asking for as a candidate to tap into in the state of California, is that collective genius. So just in a nutshell, I made that canoe in 3.5 weeks, and I paddled that baby on flat water, which meant it's not really flowing water, and I did 900 miles in 11 days. And I finished it in 4.5 months, the whole entire trip. And then I come back home, and this is really important. I come back home, and 2 years later, I find my natural family. And this is really important because legacy, this whole entire campaign is about legacy. Yeah. I find my natural family, and I find out I had a different name, Marcella Funston, which told me I was never going to have a normal name ever. And I find out that I had this really wild great-grandfather named General Frederick Funston in San Francisco. There's a Fort Funston and a Funston Avenue. And I found out through the Smithsonian magazine that he had started a trip on April 10th in Alaska on my birthday. And he had snowshoed down the frozen Yukon River, and along the way he shot and killed a sled dog to eat because he was starving. Well, I skied down the frozen Yukon River and actually saved a sled dog from being shot and killed and used him as my companion. Then my great-grandfather with 2 buddies cut down 3 trees and built an 18-foot-long canoe, and then I cut down 3 trees and I built an 18-foot-long canoe. And then he paddled down the rest of the river, and almost to the end in near the Bering Sea, he tipped his canoe and lost most of his USDA botanical samples he was collecting for the USDA at the time, and some photographs. And of course, when I built my canoe, I put little stabilizers on them, and I survived. And he did this trip in 1894, and I did my trip in 1994. He was 27, he turned 28. I was 27, I turned 28, and his trip was 1,500 miles, and my trip was 1,500 miles. So why is this important? I can tell you why this is important. It completely threw my whole entire life upside down because I was like, who is this man? And this was my beginning of my journey into legacy. And legacy is something we never talk about in this nation or this state. We do not talk about what we're leaving behind for our children. And I'm actually here to change that. If there's anything I'm going to change, I want to change how we think about what we leave behind, because what we're doing to our children right now in their future is horrible. It's horrible. It's not on my watch. It's not going to happen on my watch. So this is why it's important. Thank you. So and I'm going to try, there's so much more to the story than this. I'm really giving you guys the Reader's Digest version. I'm trying to pack a lot in just to let you know. So what happened was I found out my great-grandfather, the guy who did the same trip, at the time of his death, he was the highest ranked military official in the country. Under his command, he had Patton, Pershing, Dwight D. Eisenhower, and MacArthur. And he was overseeing Pershing as he had him pursue Pancho Villa along the Mexican-American border. General Frederick Funston is the most famous military figure you've never heard of. He was going to lead us into the Great War, and instead he dropped dead of a massive heart attack, and Pershing took his place. What's important about the story of Frederick Funston and the influence he's having on me in this campaign right now is that at 1906 earthquake, he was actually in command at the Presidio in San Francisco when he got shaken out of his bed in this early April morning. And he ended up being the one who declared martial law, took control of the city within 48 hours without communication to the outside world, got every tent and blanket west of the Mississippi into San Francisco, and set up camps for all the people who were lost without their homes. Now, this is really important story here, very important story that had impact on me. He was the one who decided to actually dynamite a huge fire break along Van Ness Boulevard to stop the inferno. And he actually, there was still to this day a controversial act. He actually did stop the fire, and the fire continued on the flanks. What happened following, though, is something that still has an impact on me, and that is that he blew up these beautiful mansions along Van Ness Boulevard, and after the inferno, the owners tried to sue him and the U.S. Army for blowing up their homes, and they lost that court battle. And out of that court battle came a little ruling known as eminent domain. I have spent 20 years on various occasions fighting eminent domain, whether it's at Standing Rock, whether it was just over a year ago sleeping in a cemetery and in trees to keep PG&E from coming in and cutting down our heritage trees in downtown Nevada City. I'm actually dealing with the impacts of my He walked on this planet for 52 years, and yet his actions are still impacting us to this day. I'm going to ask every single one of you, if you don't remember my name, please remember, what is it that I'm leaving behind in my track, in my path? And I'm going to ask each and every one of you to be very conscious of that, because right now, what we're leaving in our path today, what we are allowing to happen, is not okay. It's not fair. And we're not giving the children who all the opportunities we had growing up, they don't have those opportunities any longer. So that's a little brief story you needed to hear, just to understand kind of who I am and what this campaign is about. Because it is not an ordinary campaign, because I'm not going to put my time, my energy, and possibly my life on the line just to do more of the same. Not right now. So after filming this for National Geographic, I actually moved to LA, just down from UCLA. I studied film for 8 years. I really loved it. I came back to my hometown in 2004 after the advent of digital video, recording and editing and so on. I thought I could live anywhere, so I'll just go back home. And in 2004, I was really concerned with the state of the world at that time and the lack of leadership. And of course, now it kind of looks and feels like the good old days. And so I kept thinking to myself, well, what can I do? I'm one person, right? What can I do? And then I started thinking, well, if you're going to change the world to make it better, start with your own community. So I decided to get involved and teach people about resiliency and sustainability and building up their local economy. And then in 2007, I started realizing our city council was more reactive and not really going out there and setting a vision for our community for 10, 20, 30 years. So I decided to run. And when I got elected, I got the most votes in our 150-year history. I got 82 to 84% of the votes in my town. It was amazing. And a lot of it, I have to tell you, was because of my amazing team, right? They just had these brilliant ideas, and I love that collective genius, and I just let it soar. And so then my first year, I put together a beautiful sustainability team. We created this beautiful 20-year vision. I made sure we had our first organic farmers market in the county. We had the first extreme weather shelter for the homeless. I started several different organizations for the homeless, a time bank. I got City Hall and all the municipally owned buildings. I even got 100 volunteers together in 2 days, and we actually built a fleet of micro houses on wheels for the homeless. So for 3 years, I was hauling those things out in the woods so they could at least sleep off the ground with a roof over their head. Right. And these are and that was actually to kind of get people to start thinking about homelessness and wake them up to the fact that we had a homeless population. So I was trying to use different methods to wake people up, to inspire them, to really motivate them to say, look, you change the world by changing the community you live in. And my objective was to actually get people to walk into Nevada City and go, oh, this is what community is about. Oh, this is what a sense of place is like. And I wanted to so inspire them that they go back home and plant that same seed. That was my objective. So the first 4 years was amazing. I stepped off the city council thinking I'm done. I set the community in its own trajectory. We're all good. And I still was very involved in community. I was doing 2,000 hours a year. And by the way, we never get paid. As a council member or mayor, we don't get paid a penny. It's all volunteer. There's not even a stipend. And at that time, I've been a house painter for 35 years, so I go out there, I paint houses just so I had the luxury of having a vote at the table. It was that important to me. And so I was off the council for 4 years, did not like the trajectory of the community, what is going, and a lot of personal, petty politics. I'm like, no, really? And so I decided to run once again, and this was now in 2016. So my first term was from 2008 to 12, and then from 2016 to 2020, I ran. I became vice mayor again and mayor again. And things had changed. In those 4 years, the world had changed. And what I mean by that is when I was on the council the first time, it was really, really being proactive in creating the dreams and the paths we wanted. Within those 4 years, by the time I was on the council again, we are now on defense mode. We're only a few miles away from the town of Paradise that burned down. Same terrain, we're in terrible fire danger. Our homeless population was rising. People were losing their homeowners insurance policies because of the fire danger. We were having these PG&E blackouts for not just days, but sometimes weeks, where businesses would just overnight, they'd have to shut their doors. They were done out of business. And then of course, I was mayor when COVID hit. And I was watching it in January. And I never really paid much attention before to any kind of pandemic, not MERS, not SARS, H1N1, none of them, that this was grabbing my attention because of how the Chinese government was responding. And I was like, what is going on here? So I started warning the county and city, saying, guys, we have a problem here. We should really be, really kind of like up on the information, because if this is as virulent as they say, then we should actually be, putting some protective measures in place. And they were a little bit lackadaisical, to be honest. I did not understand at the time why they were. Now looking back, I kind of do. So finally, I declared a state of emergency or signed a declaration of emergency for my town. Then the governor had the stay-at-home orders. I'm like, that's smart for right now, just 2 weeks. And then we went to having Zoom calls for our meetings, and I started being in the Zoom calls with county and city officials, the health department, the mayors, the managers, the CEO of the county. And this is where I started seeing a different narrative than what the public was hearing. And I kept saying, well, if this is the case, you guys, right now we're going off for predictive models. Just be cautious, be conservative. We've got to till we have the real data. And when the real data comes in, we'll adjust ourselves accordingly. So they're like, yes, of course. And then once the data came in and it was not as bad as we thought, they weren't adjusting themselves. They're on the exact same path. So I started to ask, well, what's the goal here? What's the metrics? What are we shooting for? Because I feel like the goal just keeps missing over and over, just changing all the time. And they would literally shut me down, mute me on the Zoom calls, not allow me to put my hand up, or say, Reinette, you're asking too many questions. I asked more than two. And why don't you wait till after the meeting, and when everyone's gone, we'll answer your questions. Then by June, now at this point in time, I really can tell something's up. And I could tell then too that what their objective was to get everyone inoculated. That was it, back then, spring of 2020. And so then June rolls around, and this is really important. I've now won my third election. I'm ready. It's June. I know I'm going to be going back on the council for my third term in July. And Newsom makes his statewide mask mandate. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know a governor had the ability to make a whole entire law on his own. So I went down to our police chief. I said, Chad, I said, tell me, I said, are you going to enforce this mask mandate? He goes, well, I don't know how. We don't have a penal code. Right. Yeah. And he said, and we also don't, it doesn't sound very constitutional to me. I'm like, thank you so very much. I was thinking the same. So I went back home and I looked up Peggy Hall, who I love, and she had a perfect video. I know, don't we love her? And she had this video like, this is how a law is made. This is the legislative process. This is how it's, governor's not king. And then I took that video and because at that point in time, I have to tell you something. I was looking all up and down the state, looking for somebody to speak out. And what I heard was a resounding, deadly silence. Nobody was speaking up. And I'm looking around and I feel like I'm in some kind of Orwellian nightmare. I'm like, where are our leaders? What happened to our elected officials? They have to know how laws are made and how they're not made. And so I did the only thing I could. I resorted to my Facebook post. I put a bold post out there saying, just so you know, as you go about your day, Newsom is not king. He cannot make laws. You don't have you wear your mask and enjoy breathing. Yeah. And of course that went viral. I became loved and hated all at once. Yeah. And then at that point in time, my poor city hall, because let me tell you, just to let you know, my style of leadership, my mom told me, my adoptive mom said, if you want to be on the right side of history, always fight for the underdog. And I have a loud voice, I have a loud presence, and I'm willing to use it for those who don't have a loud voice or presence. So I'm out there and I've pushed you, and you can Google this if you like, I've pushed against AT&T, Verizon, PG&E, the CPUC, the governor. I'm a leader. And I believe in the collective genius, but I'm also willing to get in the ring and fight a good fight if I have to. And so that is my history. At this point in time, I was horrified how people and our leaders were actually just rolling over. It was horrific. And so at that point in time, I'm just trying to be really loud. Poor City Hall for another umpteenth time is in the middle of my crosshairs of my doing, because people are sending emails and texting, we love her, we hate her, kill her, save her, back and forth. And by this time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to start a third term. I've got 4 more years of this, and I can't shut my mouth. I am going to have to speak up. And I can't afford to have City Hall, tiny little town, be in the crosshairs, because all they're doing is answering the phones because of my Facebook posts. So I'm now ready on July 8th of 2020, ready to take my oath of office for the third time. I stepped down as mayor, ready to start as city council member, and instead I gave my resignation. And when I read my resignation, I made more enemies, because this is what I said. And by the way, I only make enemies from the people who are doing wrong, so I'm not really upset by it. But this is what I said. I said, I'm stepping down to step up. And I want to let you all know right now, my elected officials, my peers, and the county officials, there's a gentleman by the name of Leonard Hardell, who is known for actually, after years and years of collecting empirical evidence and studies and so on, convinced the World Health Organization that Agent Orange is a cancer-causing agent. And once he did that, he went to all the heads of the different chemical companies saying, you've got to stop spraying, and they didn't. They hauled him into the World Court for crimes against humanity. And let me tell you, and this is something you can ask every one of your leaders right now, remember this question. There's one question and one question only you have to ask somebody to find out whether or not they were committing a crime against humanity. And that question is, what did you know by when?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
What did you know by when? And that is something that's provable. So I said to my elected officials, I said, I want you to know something. I'm stepping down now to step up. But we're going to come back and we're going to hold your feet to the fire to the highest extent of the law.
That's right.
For crimes against humanity.
That's right.
Because right now, and that was in the summer 2020, you have enough information now to know that you are doing wrong and you're committing crimes against people.
That's correct. That's right.
So I stepped down. At that point, I'm thinking, what can I possibly do? There was also just not much information about other information. And this is all about informed consent. All I want people to do is have enough information so they can make an intelligent decision, right? And that information was not out there. So I went onto YouTube and I started something called Reinette Senum's Chew on This. And it is a whole series of interviews. And I was interviewing Sherry Tenpenny and David Martin and a doctor, who else? Dr. Carrie Madej and, yeah, exactly. So all these different interviews just so people could be educated. And then at that point I was on the high wire for stepping down with Del Bigtree, and people across the state were like, oh, we saw you should run for governor. I was like, absolutely not. And then I talked to somebody who was very much involved in politics for about 2 months, and he kept saying, you really should run. I'm like, I'm actually test driving RVs right now, and I'm gonna ride off into the sunset, and I'm not gonna do that. And then as we continue to talk, I finally said one day, I said, look it, if you're willing to do something extraordinary, something that's never been done before, if you're willing to do something that actually changes the face of California, I'm game. And what that entails is this: I want nothing to do with the parties. I cannot represent a party and represent the people. They're diametrically opposed. And I know what that comes with. It doesn't come with a system. It doesn't, being no party preference, no system, no donors, no money, right? No baseline, no foundation, nothing. It's a 0 to 60 Herculean lift instantaneously. I'm like, well, I've done that on a micro level. I can do that on a larger level. I'm game for that. And they're like, okay, we're game for that. I said, there's another thing that's really important to me. I said, I've learned a lot about legacy, and I'm really concerned about, I want to cry, what we're leaving behind. I said, if you're willing to actually fold in the 7th generation principle into this foundation to make it all about that, then I'm willing to do this. Now, for those of you who don't know about the 7th generation principle, it's beautiful, and it's brilliant, and it's wise, and it's old. And I'm not having to make anything up. I'm just turning back into time, and I'm looking for the wisdom. So what many people don't know is that our Constitution was actually inspired by the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. Our indigenous people inspired our Constitution. It was not until 1988 that Congress actually gave them full credit. But there's these 2 really important components, because I'm as an activist, I'm a person in the trenches, I'm in the foxhole, I love to get my hands dirty, I love to be engaged, and yet I've been watching my community and my whole entire country and state just going backwards and backsliding. I'm like, why? Why is the Constitution falling apart? Why is this not holding up over time? And it did for the Iroquois. It lasted for thousands of years. What's the difference? And all of a sudden I started to realize, wait a second, when you look at it holistically, here's this beautiful vessel, right? This gorgeous vessel called the Constitution. But every vessel needs 2 things to make it to the shore of its desire: a compass and an anchor. And our compass, our Constitution, our vessel was missing the compass and the anchor. And what I mean by that compass is the 7th generation shore. Every decision you make today should serve 7 generations from now. Wow. Every decision you make today should serve 7 generations from now. That is the shore you're always shooting for. And you're not looking for perfection. It doesn't have to be 100%, but that's the general direction you're going. The anchor are the decisions you make today. Our elders should be folded into that decision-making process. They look back 7 generations, fold in the wisdom to ensure the next 7 generations. And instead, we're holding them hostage in nursing homes, which is also really, really horrific. And I'm going to tell you a quick story why it's really horrific. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Gabor Mate. Any of you know him?
Yeah.
In the realm of hungry ghosts and so on. Incredible human being, working with the homeless, working with the addicted. And he, during a plenary, told me this story that just stuck so much in my heart. He talked about what he was seeing in North America and with the children and the young people and so on. And he equated it with an aquarium up in Victoria where he was living up in Canada. And he said, we have this aquarium where there's a beluga whale. And this was, quite a few years ago. This beluga whale gave birth to her baby beluga whale. And the birth went fine, but within a few days, the baby beluga whale started to fail. Its health was failing. And the mama whale didn't know what to do. The handlers, the experts, nobody knew what to do. So out of desperation, they took the last female beluga whale born in the wild, and they put her into the aquarium. And she began to teach the mother how to mother. And the baby's health turned around in a matter of days.
Wow.
How does that equate to what we're seeing today? I'm of the Lockheed generation. I was born in '66. And that was the first generation, from what I can tell, that was actually born in the aquarium. All the other generations were born in the wild. And with each subsequent generation, that door from that aquarium to the wild is shrinking and shrinking until finally, right now, we're at the point that if the door closes, we have lost our children. We are no longer part of the wild, and that's where we are right now. It is absolutely incumbent upon us that we ensure that that connection to our elders is still alive and well, and that they, the young people, the children, can actually get that wisdom from the old. So, the 7-generation principle is extraordinarily important with this campaign. Because this is the other thing is, I'm so tired of the divisiveness. I'm so tired of the divisive tactics. Everywhere I look, there's one, if it's not race, if it's not gender, it's not politics, it's not religion, there's always these reasons to absolutely go at each other's throats and divide one another. Could you imagine for one moment, if you are black, white, gay, straight, Buddhist, Christian, whatever, could you imagine if that didn't matter, but you're all still heading towards the same shore, what we do, where we would get? And so, this campaign, the first thing we started a year ago, we didn't start with a website, we didn't start with fundraising, we actually started to create something called a contract with Californians, and it's inspired by 2 different people. Newt Gingrich wrote something called Contract with Americans years ago. And then the rapper Ice Cube wrote a contract with Black Americans. And we're like, that's brilliant, we love that. So we took the best of both. We threw in the 7 generations, some other things that I know work really well and my team knows work really well. And this beautiful 30-page contract with Californians. And the reason why that was first and foremost the most important thing is because I'm so tired of us pulling Pelosi's. And what I mean by that is, oh, we got to pass the bill in order to find out what's in it. Oh, we got to vote for this candidate in order to find out how they're going to lead. That's horrific. And we're at a precipice. We're at a crossroads, right? We have no time to make another mistake. So I feel a duty that if you're going to vote for me, if you're going to campaign for me, if you're going to invest in me, right, I want to make sure you actually know who I am, what the plan is, and what we're going to do. So this is a beautiful blueprint. And right here we have just a couple little items here. The way we wrote this too is you're not going to find within this contract things that are divisive. The language that's like a lightning rod that causes wars, we're not doing that. We're not playing that game either. So these are the 7 bullet points. These are the things that we're looking at, right? That are within this contract with Californians. And you can find it at electrenette.com. We have some stuff here if you want to take some flyers home. So these are the 7 points. See if there's like a lightning rod if you think that this would start divisiveness. Natural resources, stewardship. Food and farms. Common sense education. Medical freedom. Durable economic growth. Vibrant communities. And new civic engagement.
Love that.
That's it. And on this flyer it says I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm a Californian, and that's all I care about. Are you a Californian? That's it. So, okay, so let's just talk about this contract and this campaign. Okay, so we know that we're in a tank of sharks. We know it's big money, and I have to say, though, I don't think big money is that impressive these days. Newsom throws a lot of big money around, but I don't see the positive effects or impacts on the streets. In fact, I find this backsliding more and more all the time. So, we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket. We're being really smart about this. Our objective is to win this campaign, but we need an army of people, and this is where you guys come in if you so choose. But we are doing this in such a way where our objective is to win the campaign. And let me tell you, the primary is in 5 months. Did you guys know that?
Yeah.
5 months, okay? It's okay, I love a shock and awe. I love shock and awe. That's my kind of style, that's good. They're like, wait, where did she come from? So we have we're shooting for the primary, and people have asked me, like, who's the candidate? Who's your biggest challenger? Who is it? And first of all, I have to say, I'm assuming Newsom's going to be a shoo, and he'll make it to the general November. And so they're like, well, who's the other person who's your candidate you have to compete against? And I'm like, I don't think it's a candidate. It's censorship.
Yeah. True.
Because once people see this campaign and what we've got going, they're going to love it. But are they going to hear about it?
Yeah.
And again, this is where you come in. Okay, so we're not putting all of our eggs in the election basket. And what I mean by that is our objective is not only to win the campaign, but even if we don't, our objective is to change the face of California as we know it.
That's right.
Our objective is to change the zeitgeist, the culture, the gestalt of California so we think differently. And I'm challenging everyone here as an elected official. I can tell you that other elected officials don't want you to know how powerful you are.
Yeah, that's right.
They have led you to believe that all their power is in the legislative process, and all I can say is absolutely 100% is not true. So this is how this plays out. I know for a fact, because I'd always get so many people into the city council chambers as a council member. I'm good at taking the pulse. I know how to listen to people. And then I always knew as an elected official, my job was to clear the path from point A to point B. That was my job. And to ensure that the Constitution and your God-given rights were also abided by. That's it. And so I could always bring people into my city council chambers when I'd call out to them because they knew I was fighting the good fight, and I'd pack people into the chambers. It always ticked off the city hall. It always ticked off the city council members. They start, oh, it's the cult of Reinette. Oh, it's the church of Reinette. I'm like, no, it's called representative government. You just don't recognize it.
That's right.
This is the response you get when you're actually leading the people. And so they didn't like having the public involved. They don't like the public involved in politics and making these decisions. They don't like it.
Correct.
So they do everything they can to discourage you, saying, oh, we got it covered. They pat us on the head, go away, we got it covered, and now look where we are. So this is it. I'm actually encouraging every single one of you to really contemplate about running for a position, whether it's a school board, city level, county level, state, or federal. We need people to run like their lives depend upon it, because they do. And this is also really important. I don't care what your party affiliation is. I love the diversity of California and the United States. I love how different we are. I support that. But I'm going to ask you, whether you're a libertarian or a Democrat or a Green or a Republican, I'm going to ask you to actually fold in that 7-generation principle into your campaign and your decision making and your leadership. That's what really matters. The other thing is that your leadership actually is within your actions every day. And what I mean by that is, and this is what your leaders don't want you to know, is on average we have 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day. I might have 120,000 because I talk really fast. And with those actions, or with those thoughts, they're connected to actions. We're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of tiny little decisions all day long. Add up. We get somewhere because of that. Now I'm going to go back to my little Alaska trip. When I crossed Alaska, it was not one gigantic leap. It was a series of tiny, 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 what seemed like insignificant steps that got me all the way across under the most insurmountable, inhospitable conditions you could possibly imagine. How did I do it? It was one tiny little decision and step at a time. I've done this, I've been there. So with our own personal leadership, this is what I have to say. I'm asking you to start thinking differently. Because if we can change the culture of California, we are changing the leadership for good. And what do I mean by that? That 7-generation principle. I want you to make decisions through that lens. Let me give you an example. You're a farmer, you have your crop, you have some weeds, road, you want to spray the weeds. Do you spray with Roundup, or do you spray or do you spray with white vinegar? Which better serves the seventh generation? Right. Okay, you have some food you want to take to go. Do you put it in a one-time use plastic container or glass or stainless steel? Which better serves the seventh generation? Right, the glass or stainless steel, not the one-use plastic. Again, these seem like insignificant little things, but they're not, because there's 40 million Californians making tens of thousands of millions of decisions every single day. That is getting us somewhere, and I can tell you right now that if we're going this way through our daily decision making, and we just adjust it a little bit over 7 generations, we're going to be way over here. That's how that works. So this is a very different campaign. We have a website, electronet.com. We are asking for many different kinds of volunteers. We're looking for county captains. We need people to be on the ground. We'll have our weekly volunteer meetings. This is about going out there, and again, we're not going to have an $80 million fund. That's just not going to happen. We'll have maybe $1 million, maybe $5 million, but that's okay, because it's not about the money, right? I mean, the more that you can do with the less you have, I think the better leader you are, actually.
Yep.
Because I've seen Newsom throwing a lot of big money, like, oh, we're spending that many billions on the homeless, oh, we're doing this, but I'm not seeing anything come out of it, so it's okay. So this is an army of the people, right? So the objective is to get people engaged at every level, whether you're going in front of grocery stores, or you're dropping down banners over overpasses, or you're going to events and you're handing out flyers, like Jennifer does a great job here. I mean, there's your perfect example right here. That's what this is all about. This is for the people. And the other thing is, too, that's really important about this campaign is we actually looked at the biggest threats facing this state. And we actually did the ultimate art of war, Aikido move, and we transmuted it into our biggest opportunities. What do I mean by that? What we did is we looked at the fact that we're losing our legacy farming, we're losing our topsoil. We have 64 harvests left on this planet of topsoil. 64 years of topsoil, that's all we have left. Okay, so we looked at that, we looked at our pollinator population, and that is actually what we're utilizing to engage the public and to start healing. There's a wild story most people don't know. But during the witch hunt of Europe, which lasts for 300 years, the local economies throughout Europe and the cities and the villages were all built upon the witch hunt. The magistrate, the guillotine maker, the headhunter, right, all of them. Their economies were built upon the witch hunt. If we can build economies based upon witch hunts and resource extraction, we can build economies based upon healing.
That's right.
Because everything around us right now, because we are in a relationship crisis with everything around us. Our government, our education system, even our own churches, right, our representation, even our families, our friends, our neighbors, even with our own body. We are in a relationship crisis. There's so much that's been weaponized around us. Our media has been weaponized. Our banking system has been weaponized, right? Even our own governments have been weaponized. So we can actually turn that actually into working for us and heal all of it. Now, how do we do that? This is my favorite part. So we have a bookend to this whole entire project here, this campaign. The first part is the 7-generation principle. Where are we going? That's the first bookend. The other bookend is this. How do we measure our performance? Do you guys know how we measure our performance here in America, how well we're doing? Can anybody answer how we measure ourselves and how we...
National product.
GDP, the gross domestic product. And what does the GDP include? Well, how does the GDP do well? It does great during disasters, death, illness, cancers, catastrophic fires, war. War is great for the GDP. Death is great for the GDP. It has nothing to do with our wellness. Now, who has been measuring their wellness? Well, we don't, again, have to make this up. We can look to the country of Bhutan. They have something called the happiness index, the wellness index. So what they do is every single year they have their citizens take a survey. Theirs is far more extensive than we would have here in America because we don't have the patience. But they ask questions. It's like 70 pages. Like, how fat is your ox? How high is your wheat? These do not apply to America, but we can ask questions like, do you feel safe in your neighborhood? Do you have access to clean water? Is your environment clean? Do you have access to, higher education, to arts? Do you feel like your government hears you? Are they representing you? And so we can actually have this survey every single year here in California, and we can dial it down to the zip code, non-identifying information. And we can actually find out how well our elected officials are doing. And if they're getting a D and an F over and over again, we know that they failed and we boot them out. Wouldn't that be lovely?
Let's do it.
And I can tell you, not only do you have candidates and elected officials who don't want to give you a blueprint because you can hold their feet to the fire, you're giving them a standard to hold them by, they don't want you ever to measure their performance. And I'm saying that is so yesterday. We have to today start measuring our elected officials' performance. So this is a very, very different, I like to say I'm running to be the first ungovernor of California. And this is the most unusual campaign you've ever seen. It's creative, it's grassroots, it's boots on the ground. Yes, we do need donations because we don't have the big money. And I have people saying, well, I don't have a lot of money. I'm like, if you have $1, if you have $3, $5, if we get 1 million people giving $1, that is a mandate by the people.
That's right.
And that speaks far more heavily than getting big super PAC money.
That's right.
Super PAC money is not impressive. Having a mandate by the people is impressive. So with that, I just want to say, again, thank you so much for being here because I know these are tumultuous times. I know it's really scary for a lot of people. I do want to let you know something that we've already won this. We've actually already won this. And I'm not just saying this lightly, but it is up to us to how long does this continue. That's where the power's in our hands. If we let this go for 6 months, 6 years, or 60 years, that's ultimately up to us. So I'm going to ask all of you to please participate in this. We have 5 months. 5 months to do the remarkable. And I'm willing to lay myself out there, be under scrutiny, take a lot of heat. I don't know, hopefully I'll survive this, I don't know, but my partner, Susan, and I have 14 years, we're willing to lay our lives, and I'm actually willing to die on this hill. I've had a good life. This state, this constitution, this nation has allowed me and afforded me the luxury to go out there and pursue the wildest dreams. Whether successful or not, it does not matter. The fact that I could actually go out there and pursue these things is because of this beautiful country. And I really understand how special it is because I've traveled a lot around the world and I don't want us to lose it. And I know I do have a family of veterans and they've laid their lives on the line to ensure we have freedoms. And I think it's a really great disservice not to continue the freedom and the good fight. So thank you all of you for being here, and we'll do some Q&A here, I guess, just in a second if you guys want to line up. Thank you, everyone.